The Five Jars by M.R. James. Chapters 2 and 3. Read by Robin Hearn. Chapter 2. The First Jar. That night I waited till the moon was up before trying to open the box. I do not well know why, but it seemed the right thing, and I followed my instinct, feeling that it might be the plant that made me think as I did. I drew up the blind and laid the box on a table near the window, where the moon shone full on it, and waited to see if anything else occurred to me. Suddenly I heard a sort of metallic snap. I went and looked at the box. Nothing appeared on the side nearest to me, but when I turned it round, I saw that all along the side which the moon had shone upon, there was a line along the metal. I turned another side to the moonlight, and another snap came in 2 or 3 minutes. Of course, I went on. When the moon had made a groove on all 4 sides, I tried the lid. It would not come off yet, so there was nothing to be done but continue the process. 3 times I did it. Every side I turned to the moon thrice, and when that was done, the lid was free. I lifted it, and what did I see in the box? Oh, this writing would be very little use if I did not tell you, so it must be done. There were 5 compartments in the box. Each of them was a little jar or vase of glass, with a round body, a narrow neck, and spreading out a little at the top. The top of each was covered with a plate of metal, and on each plate was a word or 2 in capital letters. On the one in the middle there were the words unge oculus, and the other jars had 1 word apiece: aures, linguam, frontem, pectus. Now, years ago I took great pains to learn the Latin language, and on many occasions I have found it most useful, whatever you may see to the contrary in the newspapers. But seldom or never have I found it more useful than now. I saw at once that the words meant anoint the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the forehead, the chest. What would be the result of my doing this? Of course, I knew no more than you. But I was pretty sure that it would not do to try them all at once. And another thing I felt, that it would be better to wait till the next day before trying any of them. It was past midnight now, so I went to bed. But first I locked up the box in a cupboard, for I did not want anyone to see it as yet. Next day I woke bright and early, looked at my watch, found there was no need to think about getting up yet, and, like a wise creature, went to sleep again. I mention this not merely by way of being jocose, but because after I went to sleep I had a dream, which most likely came from the plant, and certainly had to do with the box. I seemed to see a room, or to be in a room, about which I only noticed that the floor was paved with mosaic in a pattern mostly red and white, that there were no pictures on the walls and no fireplace, no sashes or indeed panes in the window, and the moon was shining in very brightly. There was a table and a chest. Then I saw an old man, rather badly shaved and bald, in a Roman dress, white for the most part, with a purple stripe somewhere, and sandals. He looked by no means a wicked or designing old man. I was glad of that. He opened the chest, took out my box, and placed it carefully on the table in the moonlight. Then he went to a part of the room I could not see, and I heard a sound of water being poured into a metal basin, and he came into sight again, wiping his hands on a white towel. He opened the box, took the jar, and touched first his right eye and then his left with it. Then he put the jar and the spoon back, laid the lid on the box, and put it back in the chest. After that he went to the window and stood there looking out, and seemed to be very much amused with what he saw. That was all. It's for me, I remember thinking. Perhaps it would be best not to touch the box before the moon is up tonight, and always with washed hands. I suppose I woke up immediately, for it was all very fresh in my mind when I did. It was something of a disappointment to have to put off my experiments till the night came round. But it was all for the best, for letters came by the post, which I had to attend to. In fact, I was obliged to go to the town a little way off to see someone and to send some telegrams, and so on. I was a little doubtful about seeing things underground, but I soon found that unless I, so to say, turned on the tap and specially wished and tried to use the power, it did not interfere with my ordinary seeing. When I did, it seemed to come forward from the back of my eyes and was stronger than the day before. I could see rabbits in their burrows and followed the roots of one oak tree very deep down. Once it threatened to be awkward when I stooped to pick up a silver coin in the street and grazed my knuckle against a paving stone, under which, of course, it was. So much for that. By the way, I had taken a look at the box after breakfast. I found, not very much to my surprise, that the lid was as tight on it as it was when I found it first. After dinner that evening, I put out the light, the moon being now bright, placed the box on the table, washed my hands, opened it, and shutting my eyes, put my hand on one of the jars at random and took it out. As I had rather expected, I heard a little rattle as I did so, and feeling in the compartment, I found a very little, spoon. All was well. Now, to see which jar chance, or the plant, had chosen for my first experiment. I took it to the window. It was the one marked Ores, ears, and the spoon had on the handle a letter A. I opened the jar. The lid fitted close, but not over tightly. I put in the spoon as the old man had done, as near as I could remember. It brought out a very small drop of thick stuff, with which I touched first my right ear and then my left. When I had done so, I looked at the spoon. It was perfectly dry. I put it in the jar, both back, closed the box, locked it up, and, not knowing in the least what to expect, went to the open window and put my head out. For some little time I heard nothing. That was to be expected, and I was not in the least inclined to distrust the jar. Then I was rewarded. A bat flew by, and I, who have not heard a bat even squeak these 20 years, now heard this one say in a whistling, angry tone, "Woot you, I've got you, no, drat, drat." It was not a very exciting remark, but it was enough to show me that a whole new world, as the books say, was open to me. This, of course, was only a beginning. There were some plants and flowering shrubs under the window, and though I could see nothing, I began to hear voices, 2 voices, talking among them. They sounded young. Of course, they were, anyhow, very small, but they seemed to belong to young creatures of their kind. "Hello, I say, what have you got there? Do let's look. You might as well." Then a pause. Another voice. "I believe it's a bad one." Number 1. "Taste it." Number 2. After another pause, with a slight sound very diminutive of spitting. "Bad. I should rather think it was, maggot." Number 1, after laughing rather longer than I thought kind. "Look here, don't chuck it away. Let's give it to the old man. Here, shove the piece in again and rub it over. Here he is. very demurely. Oh, sir, we've got such a nice looking. I could not catch what it was. Here, we thought you might perhaps like it, sir. Would you, sir? Oh, no, thank you, sir. We've had plenty, sir. But this was the biggest we found. A third voice said something. It was a deeper one and less easy to hear. Number 2. Bitten, sir? Oh, no, I don't think so. Do you? A name which I did not make out. Number 1. Why, how could it be? Number 3 again. Angry, I thought. Number 2, rather anxiously. But, sir, really, sir, I don't much like them. Must I really, sir? Oh, sir, it's got a maggot in it, and I believe they're poison. Smack, 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 smack. 2 voices, very lamentable. Oh, sir, please, sir. A considerable pause and sniffing. Then number 2 in a broken voice. You silly fool. Why'd you go laughing like that right under his snout? You might have known he'd cog it. Cog. I had not heard that word since 1876. There'll be an awful row tomorrow. Look here, I shall go to bed. The voices died away, I thought. Number 1 seemed to be apologizing. That was all I heard that night. After 11 o'clock, things seemed to get very still, and I began to feel just a little apprehensive lest something of a less innocent kind should come along. So I went to bed. Chapter 3. The Second Jar. Next day, I must say, was very amusing. I spent the whole of it in the fields, just strolling about and sitting down as a fancy took me, listening to what went on in the trees and hedges. I will not write down yet the kind of things I heard, for it was only the beginning. I had not yet found out the way of using the new power to the very best advantage. I felt the want of being able to put in a remark or a question of my own every now and then. But I was pretty sure that the jar which had linguum on it would manage that. Very nearly all the talking I heard was done by the birds and animals, especially the birds. But perhaps half a dozen times, as I sat under a tree or walked along the road, I was aware of voices which sounded exactly like those of people, some grown up and some children, passing by or coming towards me and talking to each other as they went along. Needless to say, there was nothing to be seen, no movement of the grass and no track on the dusty road, even when I could tell exactly where the people who owned the voices must be. It interested me more than anything else to guess what sort of creatures they were, and I determined that the next jar I tried should be the eye one. Once, I must tell you, I ventured to say, "Good afternoon," when I heard a couple of these voices within a yard of me. I think the owners must nearly have had a fit. They stopped dead. One of them gave a short sort of cry of surprise, and then, I believe, they ran or flew away. I felt a little breath of wind on my face and heard no more. It wasn't, as I now know, that they couldn't see me, but they felt much as you would if a tree or a cow were to say, "Good afternoon," to you. When I was at supper that evening, the cat came in, as she usually did, to see what was going on. I had always been accustomed to think that cats talk when they mew, dogs when they bark, and so on. It is not so at all. Their talking is almost all done, except when they are in a great state of mind, in a tone which you cannot possibly hear without help. Mewing is, for the most part, only shouting without saying any words. Purring is, as we often say, singing. Well, this cat was an ordinary nice creature, Tabby, and in she came and sat watching me while I had soup. To all appearance, she was as innocent as a lamb, but no matter for that. What she was saying was something of this kind. Get on with it, do. Shove it down, lap it up. Who cares about soup? Get to business. I know there's fish coming. When the fish actually came, there was a great deal of good feeling shown at first. Oh, how much we have to be thankful for, all of us, have we not? Fish, fish. Oh, what a thought. Dear, kind, generous people around us, so striving to supply us with what is best and pleasantest for us. Then there was a silence for a short time. Then, in a somewhat different tone, I heard, Ah, dear, the longer I live, the wiser I find it is not to expect too much consideration from others. Self-love, how few, how terribly few are really free from it. The nature that knows how to take a hint, how rare it is. Another short silence. And then, there you go, another great bit. I wonder you don't choke or burst. Disgusting. A good scratch all down your horrible fat cheek is what you want. And I know some cats that would give it to you. No more notion of how to behave than a cockroach. About this time I rang the bell and the fish was taken away. The cat went too, circling round the maid with trusting and childlike glances, and I heard her saying in the former tone, Well, I dare say after all there are some kind hearts in the world, some that can feel sorry for a poor weary creature, and know what a deal of strength and nourishment even the least bit of fish can give. And I lost the rest. When the time came and the box was open once more, I duly anointed my eyes and went to the window. I knew something of what I might expect to see, but I had not realized at all how much of it there would be. In the first place, there were a great many buildings, in fact, a regular village, all about the little lawn on which my window looked. There were, of course, not big, perhaps 3 feet high was the largest size. The roofs seemed to be of tiles, the walls were white, the windows were brightly lighted, and I could see people moving about inside. But there were plenty of people outside, too, people about 6 inches high, walking about, standing about, talking, running, playing some game, which might have been hockey. These were on levelled spaces, for the grass, neatly kept as it was, would have come halfway up their legs, and there was some driving along smooth tracks in carriages drawn by horses of the right size, which were really the most charming little animals I ever saw. You may suppose, and I should not soon have got tired of watching them and listening to the little treble buzzes of voices that went on. But I was interrupted. Just in front of me I heard what I can only call a snigger. I looked down and saw 4 heads supported by 4 pairs of elbows leaning on the windowsill and looking up at me. They belonged to 4 boys who were standing on the twigs of a bush that grew up against the wall, and who seemed to be very much amused. Every now and again one of them nudged another and pointed towards me, and then, for some unexplained reason, they sniggered again. I felt my ears growing warm and red. Well, young gentlemen, I said, you seem to be enjoying yourselves. No answer. I appear to be so fortunate as to afford you some gratification, I went on in my sarcastic manner. Perhaps you would do me the honour of stepping into my poor apartment. Again, no answer, but more undisguised amusement. I was thinking out a really withering remark when one of them said, "Do look at his nose. I wonder if they know how ridiculous they are. I should like to talk to one of them for 5 minutes." "Well," I said, "that can be managed very easily, and I assure you I should be equally glad of the opportunity. My remarks would deal with the subject of good manners." Another one spoke this time, but did not answer me. "Oh, I don't know," he said. "I expect they're pretty stupid. They look it, at least this one does." "Can they talk?" said the third. "Or I've never heard them." "No, but you can see them moving their jaws and mouths and things. This one did just now." I saw how it was now, and becoming cooler, I recognised that these youths were behaving very much as I might have done myself in the presence of someone who I was sure could neither see nor hear me. I even smiled. One of them pointed at me at once. "Thought of a joke, I suppose. Don't keep it all to yourself, old chap." At this moment, the fourth, who had not said anything so far, but seemed to have been listening, piped up. "I say, I believe I know what it is that makes that hammering noise. It's something he has got in his clothes." I could not resist this. "Right again," I said. "It's my watch, and you're very welcome to look at it." And I took it out and put it on the windowsill. An awful horror and surprise came into their faces. In a second, they had dived down like so many ducks. In another second, I saw them walking across the grass, and each of them threw his arms around the waist or the neck of one of the elder people who were walking about among the houses. The person so attacked pulled himself up and listened attentively to what the boy was saying. The particular one I was watching looked towards my window and then burst out laughing, slapped the boy on the back, and resumed his walk. The boy went slowly off towards one of the houses. One or two of the other men came and stood nearer to the window, looking up. I thought I would venture a bow, and made one rather ceremoniously. It did not produce much effect, and I could not at the moment think of anything I could do that would show them quite clearly that I saw them. They went off looking at me quietly enough, and then I heard a deep, low bell, seemingly very far off, toll 5 times. They heard it too, turned sharply round, and walked off to the houses. Soon after that, the lights in the windows died down, and everything became very still. I looked at my watch. It was 10 o'clock. I waited for a while to see if anything would happen, but there was nothing. So I got some books out, which took a few minutes, and before I settled down to them, I thought I would just take one more look out of the window. Where were all the little houses? At the first glance, I thought they had vanished, but it was not exactly so. I found I could still see the chimneys above the grass, but as I looked, they too disappeared. It was done very neatly. There was no hole, or the turf closed in upon the roofs as they sank down, just as if it was of India rubber. There was not a trace left of houses, or roads, or playgrounds, or anything. I was strongly tempted to go out and walk over the site of the village, but I did not. For one thing, I was afraid I might disturb the people of the house, and besides, there was a mist coming up over the meadows which sloped away outside the garden, so I stopped where I was. But what a very odd mist, I began to think. It was not coming all in one piece as it should. It was more in patches or even pillars, of a smoky grey which moved at different rates, some of them occasionally standing still, others even seeming to go to and fro. And now I began to hear something like a hollow whispering coming from their direction. It was not conversation, for it went on quite continuously in the same tone. It sounded more as if something was being recited. I did not like it. Then I saw what I liked even less. 7 of these pillars of mist, each about the size of a man, was standing in a row just outside the garden fence, and in each I thought I saw 2 dull red eyes, and the hollow whispering grew louder. Just then I heard a noise behind me in the room, as if the fire irons had suddenly fallen down. So they had. And the reason why they had was that an old horseshoe, which was on the mantelpiece, had, for no reason that I could see, tumbled over and knocked them. Something I had heard come into my mind. I took the horseshoe and laid it on the windowsill. The pillars of mist swayed and quivered, as if a sudden gust of wind had struck them, and seemed all at once to go further off, and the hollow murmur was no longer to be heard. I shut the window and went to bed, but the last thing I looked out once again. The meadow was clear of mist and bright beneath the light of the moon. As I lay in bed, I thought and thought over what I had seen. I was quite sure that the pillars of mist concealed some beings who wished me no good. But why should they have any spite against me? I was also sure they wanted to get into the house, but again, why? You may think I was slow in the wits, but I must confess that some minutes passed before I guessed. Of course, they wanted to get hold of the box with the 5 jars. The thought disturbed me so much that I got up, lighted a candle, and went to the cupboard to see if all was safe. Yes, the box was there, but the cupboard door, which I knew I had locked, was unfastened. And when I had to turn the key, it became plain that the lock was hampered and useless. How could this have come about? Earlier in the evening, it had been perfectly right, and nobody had been in the room since I locked it last. Whoever had done it, they had made the cupboard no safe place for the box. I took it into the bedroom and after a minute's thought cleared out a space in a suitcase, which I had brought with me, locked it in that and put the key on the ring of my watch chain. Watch and all went under my pillow, and once more I got into bed.